I have done roster size predictions. I've done a wish list based off of that. And now, let's do the big one, the prediction list. Now, unfortunately, we do have something a little bit complicated about this list. The reason it gets a little bit complicated is because Black Clover and My Hero Academia. Like I've talked about a little bit in the past, I'm not sure if Black Clover or My Hero Academia, due to how recently they became popular, will make it either onto the main roster or be reserved for DLC. Because of this hyper-specific situation, we're going to do two different branches of this prediction list. We're going to do the regular prediction list featuring My Hero Academia and Black Clover characters, and then when we're done with the list, we're going to branch off and go in a different direction and remove the previously mentioned My Hero Academia characters. Now, before we get into this list, if you haven't seen my video where I talk about why I think the roster size is going to be anywhere between 40 and 50 and no higher or no lower, you can go check that video out, linked in the description or possibly in the card section if I remember. Alright, let's start off with the Naruto roster. Kakashi, Madara, and Sakura. These characters would all be great additions to the roster for their own reasons. Sakura would add a female character to the roster who is significantly important. In fact, I would say the most important female character in the Naruto story. Madara adds a Naruto villain to the game, which is a nice piece of representation right there, and I feel like he's the most obvious villain for obvious reasons, although I would really like to see Pain, but I'm not going to put him on my prediction list. Kakashi would add less to the roster because, of course, he has a lot of moves fairly similar to other characters on the roster. Kakashi, Madara, and Sasuke would be 3 out of 5 of the Naruto characters. That means more than 50% of the Naruto roster would have Susanoo and Sharingan. With all of that said, he's incredibly popular, and I don't think... Moving on to JoJo's. Dio and Jotaro. Of all of the parts of JoJo's, I think part 3 makes the most sense to be represented. Don't get me wrong, other parts have their own thing to offer, but I think part 3 is the most likely to be represented. Dio, I would love to see Dio 100%. Of all of the villains in JoJo's, Dio seems like the best representation. I would also say that Dio is one of the most obvious picks on the list. Jotaro is much of the same, an awesome character who feels like a no-brainer to add to the roster. On top of that, the developers of Jump Force, Spike Chunsoft's previous Jump game, J-Stars, had game files labeled Dio and Jotaro, meaning they were likely planned to be DLC if the game sold well. Sadly though, the game did not do particularly well, so Dio and Jotaro were never finished. Moving on to some slightly smaller franchises, Madara and Gintoki. Madara would be a welcome addition to the roster, offering a nice female presence. She was previously in J-Stars, so that makes her a little bit easier to adapt into the game. Her anime was actually finished around the release of J-Stars, so hopefully that means they wouldn't need to change much about her moveset. Obviously, it would need to be slightly adjusted for the new gameplay style, but hopefully that wouldn't take up too much development time, increasing Madara's chances. Previously, I wasn't very confident when it came to predicting a character like Gintoki from Gintama or any other really comedy-based series, because there was a time where Jump Force's roster was nothing but serious and seriously powerful characters, but with the addition of a City Hunter character, and to a lesser extent Yugimoto, the roster seems more open to being a little bit silly, so I have no qualms about predicting Gintoki. Alright, moving on to the Black Clover and My Hero Academia rosters, starting off with Black Clover, Asta and Yuno. Asta is an obvious pick for the roster. He would add such a unique fighting style in contrast with the rest of the roster. However, I don't know enough about Black Clover to make a confident second pick. I don't think Black Clover would get more than 2 representatives, and based on the little I do know about Black Clover, I feel like he would be accompanied by Yuno. Finally, the My Hero Academia roster. Deku, All Might, and Bakugan. Deku for obvious reasons. All Might feels like too perfect of a character to not add into this game. He's also really important to Deku's character, and not having them side by side would feel like a missed opportunity. And the final My Hero Academia character, Bakugan. As much as it pains me to not have Uraraka or even Shota Todoroki on this list, I have to be rational. Bakugo is far more popular both in Japan and outside of Japan, and has been for some time now. Also, he is the most story-relevant character outside of Deku and All Might. Bakugo would obviously be the best third representative for My Hero Academia. So let's take out those last 5 picks. Deku, All Might, Bakugo, Asta, and Yuno. And let's continue the list assuming that we don't get them on the main roster. First of all, Kagura. I'd figured I'd go with another Gintama rep. Gintama's kind of cult popular in the sense that it's critically acclaimed and a lot of people are really passionate about it, but it's significantly less well known, so I wouldn't give it like 3 characters or anything crazy like that. I think 2 is about right. She would also add a nice female addition to the roster. Next up, we have Bobobo. I do not know how I feel about Bobobo. I know nothing about Bobobo past what you can learn from just playing him in J-Stars for like 15 minutes. I have no idea if the character is popular or critically acclaimed. I know he was important enough to be added to the main roster of J-Stars, so why not add him here? Nagisa. I've said for a while now, I think Nagisa is more likely than Koro-sensei as a prediction for Assassination's Classroom. That being said though, I would much appreciate it if you just considered this prediction as Nagisa or Koro-sensei, because I'm not sure how confident I am about my prediction when I say specifically Nagisa. Next up is Kinuku, a character that hasn't really been talked about amongst the community, but one that I think definitely deserves more attention when we talk about prediction list. At the end of the day, if a detective from City Hunter can make it in, I don't see why this oddly shaped wrestler man from the 80s couldn't also join the roster. And finally, Deku. I know. I said that this roster was not going to include My Hero Academia reps or my Black Clover representatives. However, I don't see a world where Deku himself isn't a part of the main roster. He's just too big of a character to not include. I could see other My Hero Academia characters making it in as DLC, but I feel like Deku absolutely has to be on that main roster. And I can just see his reveal now, either at Jump Festa or at Game Awards or something. I think Deku is going to be on that main roster. You may be wondering why I went for some less popular franchises, things like Kinuku, Nagisa, Bobobo, instead of filling out the already established rosters. And the reason I did that is because I feel like we're not going to get more roster fill-ins, if that makes any sense. There are a handful of characters I didn't mention that I feel like have a pretty solid chance. Like Toriko, I think, has a pretty good chance. Suna from Hitman Reborn, although I think he might be DLC. Nube, I didn't mention Nube. D. Grayman. All of these characters have a chance. I just chose not to mention them in my particular prediction list because they feel like kind of one-of characters who would make it in as DLC. With that out of the way, I want to thank you so much for watching this video. I cannot wait to see which one of these characters make it in and which ones don't. I'd really appreciate it if you leave a like on the video. It helps other people find it. Subscribe to keep up to date with future content. My name has been Bilbsy, and I will see you in the next video.